and specifically on what we see for this year as current threats. So SecurityGen is here to help the continuity of the business of mobile operators. So we work together with those companies to improve user experience, privacy, and protect the brands for sure. Because if you do a good job on that part, you are, let's say, a trusted partner for companies and final subscription. In our solutions, we try to mitigate and to really monitor and test against the current cyber threats that mobile operators are facing in the markets. What I'm not delivering you today is fear, uncertainty, doubt. So FUD is really some scare tactics, let's say. And if I'm doing that, please correct me, because it's not my intention. The intention here is to talk about real threats we see in the field, we deal with, and for sure to get your feedback, to get your questions. So please feel free to use the Q&A. I will address all the questions I'm able to. So please introduce them there. If I'm delaying a little bit on answering, maybe I'm waiting for the right slide or the right point to answer your questions, okay? But I would really like this to be interactive sessions. It's not just about what I have to say, it's about what you want to know as well. So without further introductions, the agenda today is to talk about current threats, how it's evolving, impacts of 5G on your security, and best practices for network security, considering for sure every time mobile network operators. So if you have been around across the generations, you watched how we have evolved on security. So back in the days of 2G, an operator would buy a closed solution, like a single vendor would provide the core, access layer, transport layer, would do the integration because all products belong to that vendor. We'll provide you a full billing capabilities, the computing, because it was all proprietary hardware about that time. And I was here already. And for sure, if you're delivering everything, the security of the solution was on the core vendor. Operator has to build the data centers, build the infrastructure, but not, over that, not much. This is early 2G, okay, and even before that. So what happened is with 3G, we see an acceleration of vendor integration. So we have secondary vendors, especially in access layer, because of pricing. You have sometimes already billing being handled by a specific company, specialized company, not your core vendor, etc. And then it moves faster towards a point where you have multiple vendors for core access and transport, and for computing, etc. And so this time your billing solution is already on a specific vendor usually. But operators in that step started doing the integration of this network because there's no single vendor, no single throat to choke, right? So you assume more responsibility. And your initial main core vendor is now usually responsible for core and access. You hire transport for specific transport vendor, routing and switching vendor. You do computing on computing vendors, virtualized software running on COTS hardware. And even physical infrastructure sometimes is being hired from third party. So now you have third party towers. Now you have third party data centers. You have your virtualized core on hyperscalers. And you bought tools and security and services for security from specific vendors sometimes. Then not only the integration, but all the security posture relays now on the operator, right? It's the entity that defines what goods look like and which is the level of security to be achieved by all these other entities supporting the business. But what about the threats, right? Back in the days, it was easy. People wanted just free SMS, bypass your billing system, free calls mainly, and privacy was limited impact. So we have call records we need to keep safe. And we had something that always has bugged me to be URL enrichment. So if I've been here, let's say for enough time, you know that back in the days when you want to send some information for a third-party partner to charge a subscriber, you just put in transferred HTTP request their mobile number. Sometimes you put even more information, more personal information in that URL, which was HTTP. So it was just clear text. That was, let's say, removed from the scene, luckily, long time ago. And what you should be afraid about disruption should be someone disconnecting your subscribers, someone doing jamming on your frequencies, and call congestion attacks. That back in the days, people used to call people on the phone, you know. This has evolved a lot, right? From 3G on, people want free data. People want to redirect your traffic, intercept your traffic, location for the subscribers, some history on browsing, because data already on the second half of 3G became the first, let's say, target of mobile phones. And you had target advertising. So instead of sending the data out, some operators decided to put some, let's say, to take advantage of knowledge, because it was not everything encrypted. And this was a matter of privacy as well. So because the risks are big, right? When you start using this data, well, you need to take care of this data. But back in the days, no privacy laws, etc., everyone was happy. This is already in the past in most of the countries. And then started rogue InnoDBs, man-in-the-middle attacks, attacks to infrastructure, supply chain attacks, not only on IT side, also in telco, and DDoS botnets. So we start seeing a lot of action of mobile phones being infected because they became relevant. With 4G, they could start sending a good stream of data per mobile phone. The smartphones had enough capability of processing, etc., to be good actors or good threat actors in that matter. Let's jump to today. Today, what takes my hours of sleep is about discussing caller ID spoofing, impersonating someone, not only on the call, but also on accessing the internet. You have surveillance companies all over, get some details on that soon. And you have these permanent roamers, like global contract roamers, that are monitored by their original operator, which is not every time an operator. So you have some concerns about privacy of your citizens even if they are not your customers. And you have some OTT data selling. So applications keep monitoring location, status, information, and sometimes this data is available to be sold. This is not concerning MNOs at this point, but still a matter of privacy on the service. What we have also started seeing is that people need to be aware of corporate customer attacks. The attacks that used to happen with the fixed access, right? They are now, let's say, viable and being tried, attempts to mobile corporate customers. Sometimes targeting private networks connected to mobile networks, and API abuse, which we will also discuss a little bit further. So when we talk about threats, first one that comes to my mind is surveillance. So what's happening is that surveillance companies, which are usually known for malware, get a lot of space on the news. But they're not only using malware, they are also using IPX connection to have information, to detect location, etc., etc. And now, privacy laws are the standards, not only GDPR. We have this, I'm based in Brazil, we have LGPD in Brazil, we have several countries with their own privacy laws. So when it's about the Trojan, then it's between the surveillance company and the end user. But if they use some vulnerabilities on the telco infrastructure, that involves the MNOs. So the best way to get these sorted out is to really do some threat detection, to investigate, to monitor if someone is tampering, is trying to get information out of your network for surveillance purpose. One good reference I left here is about the third volume of the Pegasus investigation under the European Parliament. So this is being published in January, this January. It's surpassing 1,000, I think it's 1,020 amendments or so, and new companies were brought to light on this. So when I talk about API abuse, so it's a new scenario. Now everything's HTTP2 based on 5G. So what can I say, right? Last week we received the new top 10 OWASP. So API and testing is the daily matter for most of pen testers, most also of manufacturers on the market, but they were doing it against banking, against applications, etc. Now they can exert access operators. So 3GPP defined on 5G, the CAPI, and also is a specific function to expose your network to, let's say, third-party companies. This NEF, network exposure function. But it's not like this. That's not all that is. So TM Forum started pitching for, let's say, operators to adopt Open API to expose their networks. And now we have Open Gateway on recently on Mobile World Congress. It was announced and disclosed a lot about this project. So what we know is that mobile networks will be exposed. So it's not only a matter of abusing APIs once someone is connected to your 5G core, but also there will be external connections. So, okay, you can segregate your 5G core for some time, but you know, marketing is saying that you need to provide access to third party in a way to interact with your network. So interacting with your network means about reserving special access, getting, let's say, different treatment for some subscribers, etc., which is all, let's say, prone to be abused. So this was a little bit already about 5G, but what's the real impact? So when we look about 5G standalone deployments, you see they were not the norm. They have not exploded yet. So we have a lot more non-standalone in blue from the last years. 2023, we see standalone starting to be dominant on the rollouts. Okay, you have a quarter so far. When you look on the number of operators, it's still a huge distance between those. So what marketing is telling us that, okay, 5G standalone is here, but still people are rolling out, let's say, similar number of non-standalone networks every year. So when we get to the news and say in December last year that the first intercontinental 5G roaming connection has been established, what we're saying is that, okay, we are still slow on this. Again, this is not some bad news, it's just the facts. So what's predicted or expected is that in the coming 2 years, I will address this question. I have a first question, thank you. I will address this later on, okay? So what we can do for now is prepare, right? Since you're not open yet, you're not, let's say you don't have your API exposed yet, you have the opportunity of doing it better. That's how we see. So 5G roaming scenarios for standalone. So we have a new element, SEPP, the proxy, which is a new thing. Now, let's say first of a kind, if you consider all the previous generation. And by definition, by standards, it may bring end-to-end encryption. You can have your IPX providers and all the IPX providers in this path to be signing in between the connections. So we may ensure this has not been tempered, not being altered, etc. It could also do message filtering, and you can polish any inter-PLMN control-based interface. So let's say by definition, it's a good thing. It's a good tool, an element to connect between networks. I was having a discussion just a couple of hours ago with a big international group, and I was asking, so do you think this will be implemented? Answer was, I don't trust this because it's too much of a burden to come back to the days we could discuss between each two operators. Now we have thousands of operators if you consider MVNOs, and you need to be interoperating with all of them. So a lot of things here won't happen on SEPP, not because of technology, not because of definition, because they are not viable. The number of changes on roaming daily, just considering 2 to 4G, is let's say monthly is about 1,000 or so. Then you analyze and you see how many of those impact you, and you decide what to do in every week's maintenance window. But you are every time, let's say, changing configuration on your roaming border. If you try to do that with encryption, and that's also a matter of certificates, who will be providing, where to get, etc., this comes to a nightmare. So I would advocate, and we will advocate any day to implement everything. But unfortunately, we know that this is not happening. So we need to still wait to it will be the de facto standard of 5G roaming. So please keep an eye on that, because this will influence what you have to do to keep it safe. So when you look at the 5G roaming architecture, you can split between non-standalone and standalone. If you're visiting if your home PLMN is a standalone network and you're visiting another standalone network, you have your SEPP in the middle and everything is handled as expected for a 5G connection. On the other hand, if you have no standalone connection, or if your subscriber is roaming in a 4G, 3G visited network, you keep using the legacy interface. You keep using diameter, you keep using GTP. So that's something to be considered, right? This is not, let's say, the de facto now. The de facto now is that even if you have 5GSA, this is not connected to a pure 5GSA interconnection. You are not using your eCPP for most of your roaming. And this is the, let's say, typical scenario of a roaming subscriber. So if you look at this scenario and you're adding 5G, so what you have done is that you kept your roaming interface, it's a 7 diameter GTP, and you added a new protocol to it, HTTP2, for the connections that you have, let's say, straight to the 5G standalone core. But this is not all, right? This is not only the only entry points or the only borders that we should take care of. So you know that there have been a lot of tampering and malefactors using the RAN, like man-in-the-middle attacks, IMSI catchers, etc. So that also last December, I think December 30 or 31st, there was someone catching IMSIs in Paris, that they were caught getting those IMSIs in Paris with an IMSI catcher on a car. So this happens constantly. It's not a matter of, let's say, spying a single person just for VIPs. No, this is a market around that. Also about voice over LTE, but we'll get to this later. Voice over LTE is served by the IMS core, and believe me, every place is being using voice over 5G as well. I have not seen an operator investing on a new IMS, separate IMS. So when I say I'm testing VoLTE, I'm testing voice over new radio as well. Of course, you may take care of your core, especially if it's out of your premises. It's on the mobile edge computing, multi-access edge computing. If you just came recently to the same subject, they have changed it. So usually UPFs rest on this kind of sites, but you can also have scenarios where your customers want to have the UPF or other elements, and those elements will be, in the end, connected straight to your core. Virtualization layers, something else that you should be aware of. So everything here is virtualized, but if you look at 4G and 5G non-standalone, let's say 4G enhanced, less versions, they were already virtualized because everyone knew they would have to transition to that. So this was no-brainer to already do your 4G enhanced virtualization ready, right? So who's taking care of this layer, and how this layer is being dealt with? I know I see a lot of good projects, etc. We supported some operators on that. I see the project is perfect, no refinement. I couldn't, not only me, but the virtualization experts, they could not recommend any change on the project. Then you go and do an assessment in the network, and it's not really following the project. Why? Well, reasons. It's a lot of limitations. Some solution needs straight connection to that and that. It's just a matter of being aware that virtualization is a key part of this infrastructure and must be assessed and dealt with. So where to get your references? So GSMA, right, as a huge operator association, they create a lot of good material. So if you talk about NISAS, I like NISAS, right? Network Equipment Security Assurance Scheme. It's a good initiative. It's about baselines. So don't look for accreditation. It's not that, oh, I have NISAS. Doesn't mean it's being, let's say, accredited by GSMA. It means that it follows the process that GSMA implemented. It's being tested and it's conform to the security baseline. So it's not a normative. It's about, let's say, vendors doing at least building useful security baselines and minimal security baselines. Fraud and Security Group, on the other hand, is a good source of discussions. The forums are very interesting, and a lot of good security standards come from it. So yes, you can use this for your 5G network as well. About the Open Gateway, well, this is other thing, right? What I'm concerned as a security professional is not about the capabilities. This is being erased, right? TM Forum has their own vision. Other entities, even the core providers, they are building exposure layers, each one of them. Only thing is that I can recommend is choose wisely, have a good set of tests prepared before you expose this. This is an API, and this one, let's say for a mobile operator, this will be the top risk API, bigger than, let's say, billing APIs or something like that. Of course, I have to talk about ENISA, European Commission Union Agency for Cybersecurity. ENISA has been addressing 5G from the very beginning. So from the first International Congress in 2019, they published already a threat landscape. They have expanded this document, so this being, let's say, worked around a bit. And as the technology advances, their documentation also advanced. So measures for 5G cybersecurity, NF impacts, and this is recent one, this year's documents, these maps indeed, about fog and edge computing. Oh, are these detailed instructions on how to do? No, but they are good guidelines. And I may assure you that they are not just influencing European agencies and let's say organs, but also American ones, Latin American ones, Middle Eastern, because they're good, just because of it. So when I talk about, I always talk the two sides of it. So telco security is about telco and security. So we talk about, let's say, the telecommunications recommendations about GSMA, but what if I apply a standard cybersecurity framework to signaling, to vulnerabilities. So this is how you apply, let's say, needs to it. So you need to inspect, and you need to detect, and you need to protect your core assets. So about inspection, you need to have means of testing your network in the, let's say, adequate intervals, if let's say, for all the threats that could be, all the vulnerabilities that could become threats. About detection, you should have means of monitoring. This is not manually possible, so it has to be automated. So you should have an IDS to do the detection of real threats happening to your network. And for sure, you should have means of filtering out and blocking these threats. So you should have also a protection layer. SecurityGen performs 3 of them. On the inspection part, we can do it either manually as a service or automated as a product. But let's keep it for the future. One other thing that I think is very important to notice that there's synergy between IDS and firewall, right? When you just do this together, you have a next generation firewall by definition. So when you're able to identify the threats and apply the rules, or when you're able to measure the number of attacks blocked and verify from the firewall which one were blocked here and not on the network, that's valid data. That's very relevant and important data for anyone. Another reason to get this IDS plus IPS or IDS plus firewall is that it's not common to have signaling firewalls straight connected in line with the entrance of your network. Why so? Because you need to change and to adapt with your IPX vendors. That takes time. On the other hand, if you put it in line after your border element, maybe it be STP, DA, IP gateway, a border router, you lose some balancing capabilities this element allows. So usually what we get as, let's say, desired signaling firewall positioning is a loop, is a trombone within the border gateway, depending on the technology. And that's the same loop that you use, for instance, for SMS home routing. No problem with that. But do you remember, as we have discussed, this border element is being changed every week by on demand of third-party operators because they created new addressing, they removed some addressing, etc. So you need to reconfigure this thoroughly, usually in a couple of sites, maybe on 3 sites, depending on your operator. So we have 3 elements doing the same, sometimes from different vendors, and you change the configuration. At some point, this won't be the blue arrow, won't be representing all traffic, and some traffic can bypass this. So it can be due to a misconfiguration, or can be due to a technique used to bypass this. So just change parameters enough for this element to, let's say, that it doesn't apply the rule that goes to the signaling firewall and to the SMS ROM routing and send it straight there. So you have a shortcut and you bypass the firewall without touching the firewall. That's the risk we see when we don't have an IDS at hand. So besides that, you could apply Stride. It's a huge, let's say, huge standard where you can say, oh, how to spoof a 5G network, how to tamper with. So you think about distributing, you think about microcells, etc., indoor coverage. Those are all, let's say, prone to tampering. So about spoofing, you can emulate Gnode B, you can emulate some subscriber, etc. Tampering, you can just access it. You can, let's say, explore a backdoor, and you have more opportunities with 5G because you have more physical access to it, let's put it. So you can try to attack everything, to attack the network. Maybe it's harder, right? If you take on a 5G in comparison with 4G, 3G, it has a lot of possibilities, right? But still, it's possible that you can emulate an element and you can introduce a rogue element or authenticate still authentication from a real element. And with that in place, you can collect data about subscribers, device IDs, location, authentication factors, etc. So the keys, they're vital to create clones, to do SIM swapping, etc. That's I don't know if everyone's here, but that's a question I got earlier this week. Denial of service. So we could do not only the jamming, the real frequency jamming, right? You could start doing logical jamming, create GNODs, fake ones, create redirecting traffic. All of these is a possibility when you have access to N4. N4 is the interface that connects the much time the MACs and the UPFs outside of your data centers. So you need to be aware of it, and you need to be sure that no one is implementing denial of service target or distributed denial of service using that. And as in every network, you can use elevation of privilege. So you could apply every cybersecurity framework to 5G as well. This is how you tackle the situation. You cannot think only on telco, because telco is about availability. And trust me, availability has been sorted out by the access guys, by the core guys, transport guys, but they were not thinking on how this availability, these survival modes implemented on all this chain would impact security. So we just need to have a second thought on that and see if it's possible to choose for someone that is doing, let's say, maintenance in a access element to just laterally move and get access to your core and get access to your cloud environment, etc., etc. So usually when we talk about 5G, it's HTTP2. So we can have regular HTTP methods, and you can access a lot of different functions, right? To get what? To get information of the profile of one of those functions, to manipulate its configuration, to create new functions, to get information on subscriber, right? And the worst part of it is that this is so optimized, you can just subscribe to information, so you can get updates automatically. So back in the days when I have to keep asking for someone location, keep asking for the status of the mobile, those days are gone, because if you manage to register at this bus, you can just subscribe and say, oh, let me know if anything changes. So we must be aware of the authentication authorization procedures. They are key to it, as in any API. And well, if you can do a delete, you can just provide denial of service instantly to, if not all, many of your subscribers. On PFCP, between the user plane and the control plane, you can impact a subscriber, just removing their session without other elements knowing about it. So it won't reconnect automatically. And you can intercept, you can manipulate this traffic, and you can insert traffic on behalf of third party. So that's, let's say, what's being introduced by 5G. Oh, but 5G is a bad thing. Never said that. It's not about scaring. It's about possibilities and things we see happening, or let's say, at least as a vulnerability of the networks we access. But why we're doing 5G anyway? So 5G standalone, I don't see it much for the end user so far, but I see it, for instance, in the scenario of business to business. So if you have an industrial campus, like a smart factory or a port or a mine, it allows for a private 5G network, right? So, and the matter about this is that all of these has had let's say, the trade secrets are inside those networks. So mining, you have the geology. On the ports, you have a lot of information that can be used by companies to let's say, steal your customers and to, let's say, give bad impressions on them, give efficiency measurements, etc. You don't want it to be exposed, right? About factories, well, how to make your car, how to make your product, etc. All those guidelines are inside these networks. So people tend to isolate and or to use a few sites. But anyway, someone, without touching physically your elements, can try to attack those networks. And some of the networks are under the responsibility of the mobile operators. Depending on the country, you don't have access to the frequencies without having a mobile operator. You cannot just configure a private network on your own. On this case, you cannot accept risks, right? Huge cranes, huge machines, etc. So it's life-threatening risks, right? If you have some problem with availability, if you have some problem with latency, etc. Well, what we recommend on this case, assessing the RAN security, accessing your 5G core security, and the virtualization layer. Sometimes this is shared with other elements like your data center, campus, your applications. So this can be a shared environment. And in the end, it has access to the internet. So it's as crazy as it may sound, a lot of these huge IoT elements, they need access to the internet to enroll, to measurements, to their builders, etc. So you have some clients here, IoT clients, that are connected to the internet to this infrastructure. So there's a path. If there is a path, someone can control these elements and can try to abuse your network even remotely. So you test the RAN, but you test the core as well. There are other scenarios where fully isolated private network is not possible, like smart cities. No one's building a secondary network, 5G network to cover the city if there are, let's say, reasonable operators available. And you have unmanaged fleets, even worse, you have to cover your region, your country, whatever. Smart grid, same thing. So the network footprint is large. You need to be across some huge space and distributed. Again, it can be provided by a slice or by a connection to your, let's say, to your enterprise customers anyway. But when you look at it, what you're doing is that you have your operator network functions, and you have some network functions that are connected, that are, let's say, hosted and controlled by a third party, even if it's your customer, right? Usually the UPF, but sometimes we have seen some other elements as well. So you can have SDI or you can have N4 extended between your core and someone else's core. So this is split core. We can recommend to protect if the customer wants their side of the core by monitoring and filtering, by performing access on these elements and on the virtualization itself, but also for the operator. So it's about it's a two-way trust, or two-way trust and measure, I would say. So those are scenarios that we've been facing in the market. Those are not the scenarios I was expecting to find, but there are also some scenarios we are working on, right? How can I assure to my customers that I'm not a threat to the network? And on the other hand, after I have 50, 100, 200 customers doing private networks on my infrastructure, what if one of them is compromised somehow? Other, let's say, a typical use case we find a lot is about hybrid 5G mobile networks. They say, oh, this is not a thing. Well, Porsche and Vodafone happen to disagree. They have this model implemented at one plant in France. So what's the idea, right? You have improved availability because you use network and you add resources on the public. This lower attack the private one and vice versa. One thing that really worries me is about corporate fixed wireless access, because you cannot really just filter incoming traffic and protect those guys. So, okay, like you do for the mobile customer. Mobile customer has no servers inside, no need for this kind of traffic, etc., etc. Let's block incoming traffic and you keep them safe. Okay, you cannot do the same, let's say, treatment to your corporate fixed wireless access, and their availability also differently from the usual subscriber is assured in contracts. If you have any time of your life handled corporate customer, you know that what makes them, let's say, trust you and makes them very loyal is because they need to build and rebuild and reconnect fibers, etc. Depending on the country, they have to do a huge timeline to implement a new fixed connection. When I talk fixed wireless access, it's just a matter of them collecting a new chip, or even EUICC. They just have enrolled it to a different network in a matter of minutes. So this is something that we must be aware of, and those are the real customers now that I see for the 5G standalone. Little bit on voice over LTE, new radio, as I have promised before. So while the 2G and 3G shutdowns continue, so we see that VoLTE roaming has been enabled faster than any other roaming in the world. Why so? Because, well, at some point, the US, Europe, Asia, Middle East, they all decided to start unplugging their 2G and 3G networks. So they by shutting down those networks, they're just, let's say, blocking the call switch fallback. So you cannot have voice if you don't have VoLTE roaming enabled. So it's about 12% of network so far, but it's running fast. So this being implemented very fast. If you consider that US in April, they disconnected most of 2G, 3G, April last year. In 2 months, the VoLTE roaming was enabled from Brazil, for instance. And why does it means we need to be aware of it? Because, well, VoLTE can allow someone to collect information on subscribers, like their operational system version on their mobile, and even the model, the email that carries the model. And you can try to do the location tracking. You can try to deny a service for a single subscriber or for the nodes itself, make calls on behalf of the subscriber, or intercept their traffic. On the other hand, recently, vulnerability was, let's say, disclosed on some Samsung mobiles and some other mobiles that use same chips, like Google's ones, etc., Exynos chips. So this attack if this attack can be carried on, well, and you're allowing VoLTE from anywhere, you get the image, right? This is some risk that's coming all the way to the end user, not only to the operator, not only about availability or privacy. It's a risk of being a gateway to exploit your subscribers' mobile phones. So if I can summarize what you can do, you should assess how your signal security is, how your voice over LTE and radio is, also RAN, also your eSIM EUICC. I see the enrollment right now is very, let's say, bureaucratic. People keep trying to avoid SIM swapping through eSIM to EUICC. Well, you must be aware that you need to assess the process as well and the elements, because, okay, you block everyone. What if someone connects straight to the system? And perform a mobile internet fraud assessment. It's not only about what can be done to your network, it's also about what can be done to your subscribers and can impact you financially, right? Because we have seen a lot of cryptojacking, a lot of access to bank accounts, etc., happening. And if they were somehow they used telecommunication infrastructure, questions are to be made and claims are to be made, unfortunately, to the mobile operators. So this was the, let's say, the map I had to cover today. I have just one question about the PowerPoint. I don't think we're sharing the PowerPoint, but I think we are surely sharing a document to everyone that has joined it. So I will check specifically if I can share these or if I can present these to the person that has requested. So let's I will get back to you on this subject. Okay. So I don't know if you have any other questions. I would really appreciate those because they also drive what we'll be discussing in the near future. So if you have any ideas to bounce, okay, good, thank you so much. Mitigation strategies for each of the security threats. Good question, excellent. I'm telling people to assess, but I'm not saying what to do with that. Great question, thank you. So well, about signaling security assessment, it's about implementing afterwards monitoring and protection. So detection and protection on your signaling borders, right? About VoLTE and voice of the new radio, it depends on what's being found, but sometimes it's just about configuring the IMS in, let's say, a less chatty way. So why would the IMS provide a lot of information on subscriber if they are not required for the service to work? Or what can be done? Some customers, they implement like a SIP gateway, or they implement a border, an SPC on before the IMS to protect it. It depends on your risk appetite and what has been, let's say, found vulnerable on your IMS core. But again, this is a matter of voice security solutions. RAN security assessment, well, I don't see a lot of RAN firewalls, okay? The scale is just brutal. So we're talking about hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of sites, depending on your country. So what we do and recommend once something is found on this kind of assessment is reconfiguring, is analyzing the possibility of just improving security by being less, let's say, less prone to attacks and to beating down, for instance. So if you don't accept all the ciphering options, right? Let's say someone tells you your RAM, oh, sorry, I'm just a small mobile phone. I don't have this kind of encryption. Could you just decrease the encryption several times? What we see is regularly the equipment is configured to accept it. Okay, this is good for availability. This is good because the regulator won't call you. But again, there is a limit to that because this can be abused at some point. So actions here are usually configuration on this. Let me just, before I keep, there's another point of best standard or best practice to each assessment. Well, if you talk about signaling assessments, we have SMA standards. They are base, they are not everything that must be tested. If you talk about VoLTE, well, we can take the best practices for voice systems, for SIP gateways, etc. So there are some documents, right? You should, if you're looking about testing all of these, you should look at ENISA's material, GSMA's material, and some specific ones. That's another question. If as an author, what should I look for the eSIM security assessment as eSIM has just started? Good question. So eSIM is a chain. I was reaching to eSIM, that's why I stopped it, because I see eSIM here. I said, okay, let's answer two questions if you allow me at once. Try to. eSIM is a chain of provisioning. So it's a matter of getting the keys inside your mobile phone. But there are elements that generate the keys. There are elements that handles the profiles, and those elements can be inside the operator or outside the operator or partially inside the operator. So the best thing I would recommend is that you know your chain of provisioning of eSIM from the point that is created to the point that it generates the QR code. I have not seen two operators have the same structure. So it's really unique, right? And you can test and access. Those are public interfaces. So we have documented interface. If you look at the eSIM standards, those interfaces are documented. But sometimes you engage into this kind of discussion and you find out that all this chain is outside the mobile operator. They hire a third party to do everything. So no, the only part that goes to the operator is creating the profile inside the network. So you create, I see that we have unmuted you. Just take care. Okay. So what I can tell you is that first you check what is the responsibility of the MNO of the third party. So we have started some time ago an engagement, and we would perform tests against the MNO, and we discovered 0 assets on the entire chain inside the MNO. So all the assets were on the third party. So we change it subject and say, okay, you have to talk with the third party, and we access the third party. So that's something, that's the first step to map. And trust me, I have spoken with people handling eSIM and UICC in the operator, and they had the wrong map on their heads. Because, well, not every time the person that defines the target is the same that hires the service or the product. So sometimes, some place in between, someone accepted a split solution, which was not the requirement for their internal engineering team. Okay, so I'm trying to get best practice for each assessment. Best practice for this assessment, well, this is about privacy. This is about, let's say, mobile internet fraud assessment is the service that we do. And it's really about how can someone perform phishing or perform, let's say, irregular access, collect second factor of authentication, etc. So that's a myriad of best practices that can go from even from the card company, the PCMCA, the card company requirements. If you are doing that, if you have, for instance, if you are doing money transactions through USSD or through other SMS, whatever, if the operator is doing that, they must also be compatible with the financial security requirements. So this is, let's say, this is too broad for me to define, but think of the requirements that any company in that field would need to cover. Okay, I hope to have answered everyone's now. If I'm still pending, we have a final moment to answer. Again, appreciate everyone for joining me. I asked for 1 hour. I will respect that. So if you have to leave, really was a pleasure to have you today. I will keep here for a couple of minutes trying to address last questions. Thank you so much. Okay, new question. Have you encountered fraud happening with eSIM where provision is outside the MNO network? Were there a major impact of such frauds? No, not really. I didn't find any frauds on this scenario, but still we found some vulnerability on the interface used to provision inside the MNO. So it's being exposed, like the same way it's an API, whatever, you expose some interface to a third party. And this interface was exposed to a system which was not, let's say, single used by this MNO. So the system had several tenants to it. Oh, is this a good thing, bad thing? This was not according to the risk appetite of the MNO. So if you tell someone that you want to have your provisioning totally separated from other operators' provisioning, just be sure this is what is happening, because this was not the case, right? So we investigated a little and we found out that this company did eSIM not using the same elements, not only for that customer, but for many customers. I always say this is an issue. It depends on the customer. It depends on the MNO, their risk appetite. So the initial idea was to have it on premises and limited single tenant controlled by the MNO. They had it outside of the network, and they have it multi-tenant with other MNOs being provisioned by the same elements in the chain. So no fraud found, but still not compatible to the, let's say, desires and targets of the MNO. Thanks for the question again. I appreciate, trust me, this is very important, okay? This is how I learn, because it's important to understand what is affecting all the regions and all the players on our market. So that being said, really appreciate, enjoy the time today. Thanks so much for joining us from all over the world. So have you a good afternoon, a good evening for some of you that I know that are on very late time zones. Enjoy it. Hope it has been useful. Thank you.